Back for the second session of the Rescue Dogs Online Summit Day 3. Yay! And the second session today, we're going to talk with Liz, who's a dog trainer in Cork and also an holistic therapist. And she's going to talk about a lot of beautiful therapies that you can actually use with any dog, but especially with rescue if they have any issue, which usually they do. And first, I'm going to introduce her. How are you, Liz?
I'm good. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
So the first thing, could you tell us a bit about your background and what you do, how you got into all those holistic therapies, and how you started, and everything?
Okay. I think I'd always had a talent when I was younger, but I really didn't develop it until I was much older. But I was using it even at school. When I first, one of my last, well, I was always watching dogs and horses and all sorts of animals. But then at my last boarding school, they adopted a rescue dog, the nuns. And he and I just bonded, sit outside after class, and I'd sit on the swing and he'd jump up, and we had a great life together. But unfortunately, he was an outdoor dog and they didn't know how to look after him. And they let him into, at least he took the opportunity of an open door to go into their special parlor and sat on their couch, one of the couches where they would interview prospective parents and kids. Mm-hmm. And when the nuns came along and tried to get him off, he snarled at them. So they took me out of prep and said, "You've got to get this dog out of here." So I just walked in and I said, "Come on." And the dog came on and off he went. But unfortunately, the next day, growl at nuns too often. So that was my first experience. And I just sort of shelved it, didn't think too much of it, but I was always watching. I was watching the way people rode horses and what they did and how other people managed their dogs. And then after that, not a lot. Life got in the way. I went to uni, I got married, I had a family. My husband died of cancer and I brought up my 2 children. But during that time, before I had my family, I had a chocolate-colored Labrador. No training at all in basic obedience. But we used to live in Galway, and I got that dog to sit behind the big Galway walls, sit and stay while I went round the other side. And then I'd do a whistle for a recall and he'd come bounding over the wall. And I got such pleasure out of that. So then, as I say, life took over and brought up the 2 kids. But then I decided afterwards that I was going to go back to learning and, learning about dogs, dog training and everything. So that's what I did and started reading all books and talking to vets and veterinary nurses. And that was it. I set up and decided I was going to do it. And it was back along when it was quite some time ago. There weren't that many dog trainers or anything like that. So then I came across, I got myself organized, as I say, passed my exams, etc. And I decided if you are going to look after dogs and train them, especially rescue dogs, you have to get you have to get rid of their personal baggage before you can ask them to sit and stay. And so I said, right, instead of just being a dog trainer, I've got to look for therapies. The first one I found was T-Touch. Okay. And that was an absolute revelation. It was a long system of training because I went over for a weekly visit twice a year until I qualified as a practitioner. I had to go to England. I had to do case studies and all sorts of things. And it was a revelation because during that time, doing the case studies and everything, I found out so much more about how to deal with dogs. And even just as an example, this lady had about 5 dogs that had been retired from the blind. Mm-hmm. And I said, can I practice on them? She said, yep, absolutely fine. So there I was practicing away, doing little T-touch circular movements. And I found 2 lumps on the dog, which she had noticed. Actually took that dog off to the vet, got those lumps removed before they got malignant and were going to kill the dog. So that was just a bonus for everything else. But it taught me an awful lot. It also made me realize that there's an awful, you come to look after dogs, but you must meet them where they're at. And then you offer the T-touch or therapy, just you offer it to them, and it's up to them if they want to heal or otherwise. And I've had many instances of dogs refusing for a simple reason. And it's those sort of times that gives me such a dog. Also that if you don't respect them, if you don't meet them where they're at, in whatever walk of life they are, they will not respond to you. Sometimes they won't respond at all anyway. But if you actually are empathetic and try and understand them and where they are, instead of trying to foist on what you want them to do, they will actually, most of them, meet you halfway. And it's a very chastening way of dealing with dogs, that you realize just how much they understand and how much they will they want you to do for them, and they'll just open up. The T-touch, it's circular movements mostly.
Okay.
That T-touch up there, that slide on the ear, that's called an ear slide, because at the end of the ear are all the acupressure points. And so I like to tell clients that if they use it like as though they had a tulip petal in their hands, and work from the base of the ear up to the edges in strokes, it's very bonding. It's also for fearful dogs. You can use tiny little circles just on top of the skin of the dog's mouth. If he's a mouthy, you can even get under the gum. But you must actually want you to do it, okay? This is what I found when I first went there and started learning. There was so much to learn. There was so much to share with other people when I got back home. You have all sorts of, as I say, you've got the touches. Then there are the body wraps, as you can see on my little puppy there. There's the thunder shirt, which can be for fearful dogs who are afraid of noises and stuff. And in fact, I used a thunder shirt on a client's dog. I trained her dog as a puppy, and she rang me. Oh, the dog had got to be about 2 and had suddenly developed a terrible habit of, when she was taken out with a lot of her family, she was quite highly strung, she would screech and go into high-pitched barking whenever they passed anybody or a dog, or she heard a dog in a garden. And it was getting so tense that nobody wanted to walk the dog. So I went to her, and first of all, I let the dog choose some oils. And then I suggested the thunder shirt. We put it on, and I said, come on, we'll go for a walk. I decided I'd take the dog first because I'd be calmer, as I hadn't had any of this business before. And the owner would have been a bit nervous. And she walked away like a dream. She was so laid back, so calm, because these body wraps or thunder shirts or ordinary T-shirts, they actually bring an animal to connect back into its body, to connect to its feet, and to be grounded, and to put the brain back in gear. And so that's what had happened to this dog. And so she walked along, and the owner walked her home, and delighted with herself. And about a few weeks later, I actually, I texted her and I said, how's it going? Pure bliss, she said. No more meltdowns when the family's with us. And I thought, this is it. This is great. This is the answer. And so she's even going to, for the summer when it gets very hot, she's going to make a light thunder shirt, which she'll, machine up herself, so that the dog will always have that support, if you like, because T-touch is cumulative. It works on the central nervous system, and it allows a dog to remember how to regain its potential and its perfection, which it lost before the trauma, which it had but lost due to trauma or excess stress. And so by doing a little bit and often, when the dog, asks for it, and then letting the dog walk away, it keeps going, and it actually gets the dog to a state where it can cope with the rest of life, if you like. As I say, the body wraps and things are very good for grounding. And then the actual groundwork, as you can see in one of the photos there, is very useful for, again, getting a dog to realize where its feet are, and that its feet are connected to its body, and etc., etc. Then it gets trust at turning and moving and seeing its tail and stuff like that. And my puppy, boxers didn't used to have tails. She has a very long one, and so she turns around to see what's happening. When you use T-touch and stuff, you're actually allowing the dog to realize that the tail is connected to the back. Also, in that photo of my other boxer, Juno, you can see how carefully she's walking across a bridge. She didn't want to go across that bridge at the beginning, but it was very good for her. I didn't encourage her. As you can see, she's not on a lead. I walked ahead slowly and let her just walk along, creep along, the different texture, hearing the water underneath, and she was fine. The next time we went back across it, she was absolutely fine. Give the dog confidence to go and find its way in the world, if you like.
Yeah.
And doing that with rescue dogs especially, as I say, you're getting them to regain their self-confidence, to lose their fear, unless, of course, a trigger comes. But you learn where the triggers are, and then you take steps either to let the dog process it from a distance, or you put a body wrap on or something that keeps them calm so that they can look at it and say, yeah, okay, I can deal with that. And then you might go a bit closer. But all of these things are aids for the owner or somebody who's newly adopted a dog. And it just makes all the difference.
Yeah.
I had another lady, the very first person I had when I qualified, when I became a practitioner for T-touch. She had the most beautiful rough collie, which her daughter had got for her as a gift. And that collie definitely came from a puppy farm. So he had huge baggage. He had no idea how to behave. All the other dogs in the family disliked him. And the mother couldn't bond with him. She wasn't even there when I arrived. I worked T-touch on that dog all afternoon and was thinking I was about to fail. And she suddenly returned home and said, would you like a cup of tea? And intuitively I said, I have to stay and listen to this woman. So she explained to me all that had happened and how she couldn't bond with the dog. And I'd watched her. When she came in, she sort of very absent-mindedly patted the dog, and the dog just walked off and didn't even look at her. During the course of the catharsis of telling me the story, the dog walked over, made eye contact, laid its head on her lap. She stroked it in a way that was mindful. The dog closed its eyes, and it was the beginning of bonding. I went home so excited after that. My first, as I say, client after T-touch, and a huge success. And I now use T-touch. I use it on my own dog. I don't stroke my dog. I generally use T-touch. And you start off with a gentle backward movement on dogs, because the back of the hand is gentler. And then you can move when they let you. You can move to other touches. You can use an assessor hand. If you have a dog, and I've had rescue dogs that I can't handle, I will use an assessor hand, which is a plastic hand attached to a piece of wood, so that you can do it from a distance. You're not in the dog's personal space, but also you're not going to jump if the dog starts up or anything. And I've dealt with and had huge success with a couple of rescue dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk about a bit the one that we see on the picture there, the lead, and because I know we see the wraps and all, but there's a specific lead as well that helps. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yes.
I know about it, but I'm sure the audience doesn't.
That dog is Freya, my dog Freya, and she's in a body wrap, and it's all over. First of all, I'll explain that it's in a large place all over her body, rather than like with little Saffron, who's up on the left-hand corner, who's got it tight around the top of her body because she's very excitable. Then you have a double-ended lead and a harness which has a hook, a ring on the back, the dog's back, but more importantly, a ring on the chest. And so you are connecting that double-ended lead to the front and the back. So it's like having a horse. The dog is like that. You can move and maneuver. It can't get away from you, but you're actually there, and you can gently handle and work energy down that lead so that the dog can work with you and beside you, and going through the groundwork with them. You're leading them or walking with them so that they come with you, but you're not too close. You're allowing them to work as they please. And that's the essence of the double-ended lead. I actually now, I start off on all my dogs with the double-ended lead, but I always end up by using this ring. When they are sort of trained and not going to pull the arms off me. Little Saffron isn't at that stage yet. But when they are, I'll use the front, because you can move the whole body. If you just have a connection on the back, you're windsurfing, and you can't turn a dog, and he just pulls and you get led anywhere and everywhere. Okay? Does that explain it?
Absolutely, yeah.
I used to work at a rescue centre, and I'm going to go back there now that I have more time. And one of the dogs I worked with there was a beautiful collie. And I think I sent you a photo of her. Her name was Jane, and she had been, I say trained in inverted commas, by a so-called dog trainer who had actually traumatized her. She was such a sensitive dog, and when I came on the scene, she would be huddled in her kennel and didn't want to move, didn't want to come outside. She allowed me to go in and to sit with her and to do T-touch. And as far as I remember, I offered her oils and I did some Reiki. But she was so traumatized, it took months to get her. You know, if the carers in the rescue center wanted her to come outside just to eliminate, they had to lift her out. And so she would sit there, she wouldn't make eye contact with me, and I'd just work away and I'd talk to her gently all the time. And suddenly she began to, take a bit of notice. Her head came up. She began to go outside by herself. She even started to go for a walk with one of the carers, and she started to interact with the other dogs. That picture of her there, once she was adopted to a lovely set of people who had another dog, and they used to race on the beach together and enjoy themselves. To look at Jane now in that photo, you'd never think of all the trauma that she went through, and how, as I say, it was kind of, she'd look away almost to say, if I look away and don't move, you may not, be there. You might go away and you won't see me, sort of thing. And this is what she did the whole time. She was never aggressive. So I would always ask and say, okay, I'm going to come in and offer you T-touch. Is that all right? Because for me, animals must have a choice. They must be allowed to choose.
Yeah.
Whether they want to receive it, whether they want to heal themselves or not. Just like people, we have to respect them and give them a choice. Otherwise, we are taking away their autonomy and not allowing them, and they can get resentful. Mm-hmm. And in that same rescue center, shortly after that time with Jane, there were two brothers who had come into the rescue. Beautiful dogs. And I think they were collie crosses or something like that. One of them let me work away with him from the very beginning. I could put a collar on him. I could work T-touch, talk to him. I even started leading him around. And I would work with him with the brother sitting in the back just to watch and see things happening. But if I moved towards that brother or tried to offer him T-touch, he snarled at me. So I said, fine. You don't want it, he does. But very interesting, two dogs, same litter. One was open to receiving and one just didn't want to know. Very, very interesting, but their choice. Mm. Okay. Anything? Yeah. Go. Yep. Carry on.
Yeah. Can you talk about, because I know it's also, we covered their T-touch, but I know there's also like therapies that you use as well. And one of them is Reiki. Can you talk a bit about Reiki?
I don't use Reiki quite so much.
Okay.
I more like to feel that I'm offering the opportunity for an animal to heal through the other therapies. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I used to use it, and I used to use it on myself and my dogs and everything. Reiki is energy. We're all made up of energy, but it is the intentional sending, directing energy to another person or another animal, which is why you must ask permission to offer it to them. And I learned Reiki, I got level, and I just got level 2, and I pranced into the rescue center about a day after, buzzing, literally buzzing with energy. Previously, I'd been dealing with a very shy, gentle dog who was very, you had to be very slow in movements towards her and let her come to you, etc. I walked in, as I say, buzzing with energy, and she took one look at me and scuttled away under the table. And I couldn't understand this for a second. So I walked to her and I tried to pursue, to talk to her and everything. She barked loudly at me and ran into the next room. And it was then I realized that my energy was too much for her. Mm. And so I don't use it as much, but I will use the essential oils, which I love. I love it as well. Yeah. The essential oils work on the central nervous system, just like T-touch. But the difference with the essential oils is that dogs can sniff them, they can lick them if they want to, or they can present a part of their body if there's something wrong with them. And when I was learning in the UK, we had to do tests and try out on animals. And the tutor had an animal that had it was a horse that had an injury to its knee. It had an open wound. So we did our test and we were offering the oils, and lo and behold, the horse, the mare, just lifted her knee and indicated she wanted the oil, a particular oil, to be put on her knee. I was absolutely blown away with that. But I've had that happen to me a few times, that an animal will, they'll sniff the oils, they might lick them, And then they will just say, yeah, okay, I'm presenting my hip. See, put it on there. And you rub it in and you just see the eyes glaze and just satisfaction. And then they might go to sleep. And that's what the oils do. They release emotions, or they do something physically for the animal, psychologically, whatever they need. I used to do tests. So I would test at home and tap into the animal's energy with a surrogate, human surrogate, using kinesiology, or later on I'd dowse. Now I use it, I just bring my oils and offer them because I think it's a better way. It gives the dog the choice.
Exactly, yeah.
And I love using them like that. As you can see, all my dogs have had oils. I've used them with dogs that one boxer that I had cancer, and she chose specific oils for cancer. You find with any dog, especially rescues, because generally a rescue, they're probably fearful, nervous, they're carrying their baggage, they've lost trust in humans. So, and they might be reactive. So oils, you generally find there's a theme. They will choose those oils that work for them.
Yeah.
And if you offer others, they'll just walk away.
Of course, yeah.
Some of them will fall into the bottle and try and lick it. Some it'll be very, very subtle and you hardly see it happen. Sometimes it works quickly, sometimes it doesn't. With one rescue dog, he had been rescued off the street in Cork with a suppurating wound on his hind leg, which had gone into the bone. He had a hole in the bone as well. So he was completely lame. He was a very complex character. Most of the time, he was a perfect gentleman, but once he was thwarted, he was like an aggressive demon. And if he didn't like a dog, he would try and go through a plate glass window, double glazing, get it. Which is why he couldn't be homed in the rescue centre. He lived with one of the carers who also worked in the rescue centre. And that's where I came across him. He was being looked after by the homeopathic vet there, and who was dealing with the hole in the bone, which was healing. And I asked permission to use oils, and that was fine. So I brought them down. He limped in and sat up on the carer's lap. At that stage, I'd done my test, and I had the oils diluted in a carrier oil. And I was offering them to the dog. His reaction was so subtle, you hardly noticed it. And I was sort of, a bit half-hearted about it. I was getting a bit, thinking this isn't going to work, especially when suddenly he jumped down off the couch and said, "May I go out?" So as we let him out, back into the kitchen, I was walking behind him and I nudged the Ruth, and I said, "Look, Ruth, he's not limping anymore." He was never lame again. He then started playing with a toy, which he'd never done before. And as you know, rescue dogs rarely play with toys because their background wasn't conducive to having toys, or was too stressful to allow them to play. And from then on, the wound healed. To say, he was never lame again. He had numerous tests for oils until we used to tease him that he smelled like a perfumery. He loved his oils. I used to bring them down on a regular basis. And he got rehomed about, 6 months later. And he lived with new owner and another rescue dog until he died of heart failure. Happy out. But, you have to have some, I feel anyway, you must have something else other than just straight dog training.
Yeah, I agree.
You've got to peel those layers. It's like us. If we come with a baggage, we need healing. We need help. and so we go either for the oils or whatever, because both T-Touch and the oils work on the humans too. Often the oils that the dog chooses are also the oils that the human needs as well, which is why they're not getting on with each other, or there is some sort of mix-up or misunderstanding in the behavior between both the dog and the owner. And with T-Touch, the lady who started the Tellington Touch method, she was working on a horse, and she had her brain and the horse's brain wired up together. Okay, and while she was working T-Touch on the horse, both the brain patterns of the horse and herself were exactly coincidental. They were exactly the same, the pattern, which I found just amazing. So in other words, when you're doing T-Touch or when you're giving the oils, you are the owner who's offering them gets the same benefits if they want them as well. But you have to be careful about the oils, because you have to know what you're doing, because they can be toxic.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, and some oils you can't give to a dog if they're pregnant. Some can't be ingested unless there's a very high dilution. And cats, you have to be very, very careful with cats, because the oils are so toxic to them. So that's why often, especially with a rescue, I will bring what we call hydrolats or hydrosols. The oils, the essential oils, come from plants, and they go through a distillation method so that the end product is the oil. But on the way through, what drips down from that distillation is the hydrosol or floral water.
Yeah.
Much gentler, you know, to use because they're already diluted, but just as powerful. But some dogs, and I will often start using those with a rescue dog first before I will go on to the essential oils. Yeah. Simply that I don't want to frighten them. I want to give them a good experience, and I find that generally works very well.
Yeah. And how do you use like the different therapies together? I suppose it depends of the dog's choice, I suppose.
Yeah. I use them fairly intuitively. So once I've spoken to somebody and they have a particular problem, let's say with a rescue, that's barking at strangers, won't let somebody in the house, then through the conversation, I might ascertain, well, it's probably a bit of misunderstanding between the owner and the dog, but also it's past baggage from the dog. So the oils will be good, but also T-Touch, you know, if I teach the owner some of the touches so that they can do the touches themselves. And if an animal, if a rescue dog or any other animal has a particular liking for one oil, I will then mix it there and then in a carrier oil and give them instructions how to use it. And then it is gentler and it's safe to use. The actual, you know, when you're offering the oils themselves, you literally just undo the cap without taking it off, because the oils are very volatile, and too much would be, you know, just too much for the dog or the horse or whatever. And then I let them choose. Then if I feel it's necessary, I will perhaps suggest a Dr. Bach flower remedy.
Okay.
I use those too. I've done a diploma in those too, and they are terrific. One of my favorites is Star of Bethlehem, which is super for rescues because it's for shock and trauma.
Yeah, trauma today.
Yeah. They're very subtle. They may not work immediately, but they can do. I use that one an awful lot with a rescue dog.
Mm.
And you can use it either you can put on a treat and just give it to the dog, a couple of drops. You can rub it on their gums. You can put it on the top of their head because there's an acupressure point there.
Okay.
One of the really amazing times I used it was I went up to see a lady in Inch, and she'd just lost one of her favorite dogs, and her other dog had stopped eating and was pining. So we worked on him with oils, and I also suggested Star of Bethlehem for him. And this was a very uptight lady. She didn't show grief very much. She was a very gruff lady, but you knew there were still waters ran deep. So I said, I reckon you should take it yourself. And when I rang her the next day or a few days later to check up on how things were, she said, I took it the following day and I cried for the whole day. She released all that grief. And that had to be a good thing. So rescue is brilliant for dogs that have a difficulty traveling in cars. I don't know how many dogs that used to come to classes drooling at the mouth and all upset because they didn't travel well in the car. And I would suggest Rescue Remedy. The next time they came, they were absolutely jumping through their skins and happy out. It's a brilliant tip for dogs.
And is it the same way? Do you use it the same way that the oils, you just offer it?
No, I generally I will often dowse for it or pick it out intuitively, and as I say, then suggest it to the owner and tell them how to use it, morning and evening, whichever way they want to use it, like on a treat or on the gums or on the pole of the head. And I say, look, use it for a fortnight, see what happens. They are so subtle sometimes that you don't notice anything until down the road a piece, you suddenly say, God, he's not barking at Joe Bloggs anymore. He can walk past that house. And so that is more an intuitive choice, and obviously going by what it, the obvious things that it says, what it's needed for, or what it works for. But you don't. It's a different thing. The oils are what animals would actually choose for themselves in the wild. They would go and self-medicate on the particular plant. And even though the remedies, the flower remedies, come from plants, their distillation process is totally different. And also they have been preserved in a tiny bit of brandy. And so that's a totally different, there is no smell of them, but there is an energy of them. And that's how you use them.
Okay. And because you mentioned like it can be like very useful for dogs traveling in the car. And
Yes.
I know yesterday we had somebody who actually had that problem. So you would just give it before traveling? Or?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would suggest to them that 10 minutes before they're getting into the car, they give it to them in whatever way. But also, ginger essential oil is brilliant for calming the stomach. So what you do is you get a tissue and you pour a couple of drops of ginger essential oil and put it in the car, but not too close to the dog.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be too close, otherwise, he may not need it. But if he wants it, he can smell it because they're so volatile, and a dog has a good nose.
Yeah.
And you can just see if it works for him. There's also another remedy, flower remedy, but the name is at the moment, which is very good as well. But I find Rescue Remedy is just brilliant.
Okay. And when you use like those, I know you mentioned that some cases were quicker to resolve and some are less. Like, do you need usually like follow-up sessions or
What I
you
do
want
is
it, or how does it work?
I work with them and offer the oils, or suggest a remedy, teach touches, and then about a week, maybe a fortnight later, I will ring them and I will see how they're getting on. But the way I work is I generally do one session, but that might take hours. It depends, how long what they need. I might, because with the oils and the tea touch, they work, but if you're not going to change the system you're using, so in other words, it probably means that they need to maybe change, the owner has to change the routine or put in some basic obedience training. So I use all of these in combination, and I explain to them on the phone, this is what I'm going to do, that's my fee, and that's, I don't, if it takes 3 hours, I'm there for 3 hours. Then I'll write a report afterwards with all the recommendations that I've made during that visit, plus anything else I can think of. And after that, I'll do a follow-up. But they can ring me at any time, a week away, a month away, 6 months away, a year away. I will only charge again if I'm going out to see them again. So I find that it seems to work very, very well. And because they have that backup support, that they know that, it might be something minor. There was one lady who, she really just wanted dog training, but she lacked confidence in herself. And she used to ring me or text me on a regular basis, asking for a bit of advice after my visit or having a question for about 6 months. And then suddenly I got an email from her 6 months and she said, things are great. It's all working out and we're really doing well. And I thought, that's great. That's what I want, because that's what I'm offering. That if I can give that backup support, that somebody says, yep, I'm all right on my own now, but I know I can come back to you if necessary.
Yeah. And you only do in person, I suppose. Yeah.
I do. Well, I do. I have done Zoom, and I still do. Say if somebody is very far away from me, or even abroad, then I can do a Zoom session.
Okay.
Obviously, I won't be able to do oils, but I can show and have sent photographs of how to do tea touch. I would, in those situations, I will actually, if they ring me and explain their situation, I will then send them a very detailed questionnaire, from where they got the dog to what they feed them, etc., 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 to see if there's a bearing on the behavior. They answer it, send it back to me, then I can make a judgment call on what advice I should be offering them, so that the Zoom call will be full and only on that, what I can do, what routine, what advice, etc., because I have all the information. So it's quite detailed. And then after that call, I will then send them the report, and they have the option of follow-ups of text or emails or something if they need it. So the only thing they don't get will be the oils, but they will get the advice of any flower remedies and things like that.
Okay. And can you talk a bit about the different issues that you see, like mainly with rescue dogs? Like, I know there's so many different ones, but I'm sure you came across a lot of rescue dogs, and talk about a bit the issues that you see.
The main issue, I think, is lack of trust, obviously, because the whole thing about, you have all these stories, man and his dog and loyalty, etc., etc. And so we as humans have broken that trust, maybe deliberately or not, but the trust is broken. The more sensitive the dog, the more they lack that trust. That can make a dog like Jane go back into her box and be absolutely shut down. Or it can make a dog reactive so that they bark at everybody. And that, it seems to me, for clients, is one of the most disconcerting things, that the dog barks and lunges. And you have to try and explain that dogs bark for different reasons. And often the reason why they're barking is they are afraid. It's not that they want to eat the person or the dog coming, but that they are afraid and saying, don't come any closer, otherwise I'll have to do something. So I find that to be a major issue. But it also means that I must read the signals to ascertain, is it that fear, or are they genuinely aggressive and the person is going to have a difficult, and should the dog stay with them and things like that. But fear and lack of trust would be a major one. Also an issue, you could say it's not an issue with the dog really, but it turns into an issue, would be that people feel sorry for rescue dogs. And that isn't the right emotion. I know that sounds awful, but what I say to my clients is, if you keep remembering his pain, he won't forget it either. Okay? So when you get a dog, a rescue dog, you should acknowledge his past, draw that line in the sand and say, you are one lucky dog, and so are we, because we found each other. That's positive. Then you move on. And you give him boundaries. Because even a rescue dog, dogs are opportunists at heart. And so they come in to anybody's house, hardwired, what's in it for me? If you are feeling sorry for the dog, he's going to walk all over you, just like a child will. The boundaries for children and dogs are the same. And once you put in those boundaries, so a dog knows exactly what you want of them, that then gives them self-confidence to keep going and the respect. So then you've got this beautiful two-way relationship of mutual respect, which is what I base my philosophy on for training dogs.
It's just beautiful. Just beautiful. Love that. Do you have any advice for people who recently, adopted a rescue dog or thinking of adopting one? Do you have like a checklist or something that you could share?
I do.
Good.
I actually, first of all, it's the one, drawing the line in the sand, okay? And then I would say to them, put in those boundaries. And then never assume that your dog he may not even be toilet trained. And so many people make that assumption, so they're disappointed from day one.
Yeah.
Also, you can't be casual with a rescue dog. So in other words, you can't let him off the lead until you know that you've got proper training and a recall, and the dog trusts you enough to come back to you.
Yeah.
In fact, what I said to you was that if anybody wants to contact me through my website, they can, and I will give them my checklist on which these things that I've said to you, but also many more things for what they might want, which will help them, so that they have a checklist to go through. Don't let him off the lead until he comes back to you. On lead, always, in the back garden, in your front garden. Don't let him meet and greet other dogs until you know that you've read his signals, the dog's signals as to how he is responding to a dog approaching. Is he standing up very, very tall and his tail erect? You're in trouble. Walk away. Is he crouched down? Then stand in between him and the person coming. Because then you're showing him, you don't have to worry about this. I've got it. You don't reassure, but you stand there. Dog learns to watch you and pick up on your signals. You're not worried about the oncoming people or dogs. He doesn't have to. And you give the dog space. Many people want to meet and greet immediately. You don't have to meet and greet everybody. After all, if you put it into human terms, you don't like everybody you meet, do you? And there'll be certain people you avoid, me too. And it's because our energy doesn't. They may be the nicest person in the world, but as far as you're concerned, your hackles go up because they annoy you. And so telling your dog that he must go up and meet Joe Blogg's dog, when your dog is saying, is backing away, hiding behind you, putting its ears back, the signal you're giving to your dog is, I am not listening. Do as I tell you. The dog can't trust you. So you must build that trust for your dog so that he says, what do I do? One of my dogs was brilliant like that. I could actually just say to her, when other dogs were coming and being a nuisance, which happened in one particular case, I just said to her, Nutmeg, you sit there, I'll deal with it. And she stayed where she was, and I walked up and stood in front of her, folded my arms and sort of said, you've got to come through me first before you go near my dog. And they stopped and ran away. She could trust me because I'd deal with it. And she gave me a few instances of looking over and asking me for help. And that's what you need to do. You build up the trust in your dog so that he says, I can't cope with this. You cope for me. You do that, they'll follow you to the ends of the earth.
True. Beautiful.
Okay.
Okay, so do you have anything else that you would like to share, or another case study? If people are watching and have any questions, you can start writing them down in the comments so we can actually answer them. But yeah, if you have any other case study that you want to go over, or something you want.
No, I had one beautiful rescue dog, which I'd love to talk about, because I followed her because she actually went to a friend of mine. But she was a dog that landed up in that particular rescue centre. She'd been loose again on the streets of Cork and had a litter of puppies. And the dog wardens made various attempts to catch her and frighten the wits out of her. And she actually was so traumatized by it. By the time, when they finally caught her, they immediately separated her from her puppies and dumped her in the rescue centre and took her puppies off her. So she came down to the rescue centre and was just an angry dog, as you can imagine. Very upset. Nobody could get near her. If she had to be vaccinated or groomed, she had to be partially sedated by the vet so that people could handle her. It was at the time when I was working on Jane and doing T-Touch, and I was working outside. It could have been on Jane when she finally started coming out of her kennel, or another dog. And I was working in the sunshine, and I noticed, I knew all about this dog, Sherry, and she would never come near us. She would just keep at the distance, circling, but never come too near. But then she started, while I was working, she started running in, barking and running away again. And I said to one of the carers, I said, Sherry wants some therapies. So we talked to the vet, got his permission, partially sedated her. She came in muzzled inside, and I did T-Touch on her. And I worked T-Touch for quite a long time, till we could take the muzzle off her. She didn't have to be sedated, and I didn't have to use an assessor hand. Now that took a long, long time. But the next thing was I heard she'd gone to my friend and been adopted. And they were brilliant because they are real soft touches, these two. So I was worried, but not a bit of it. The first thing they did was they gave her boundaries in that she wouldn't come near them. They had another dog who she latched onto and followed all the time, and he would have nothing to do with her, but she adored him. But they would offer that dog a treat, and she would look up and want one, but she had to come to them and take it from them. They weren't going to walk to her or go under the table or whatever. So gradually, she learned to come to them and to take a treat. Nothing was done then. She could grab the treat and walk off until she could come up and be handled and didn't bark at strangers and everything. It was absolutely amazing what they did with her, the follow-on from what had been started in the kennels. And she lived with them until she died. Long time she was with them too, and they adored her. And that to me is just, you know, it's giving, as I wrote in my notes when I was thinking about it, she went from hopeless to being adopted. And that was gorgeous. It really was.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Beautiful.
Okay. So she was one of my favorites, that and Jane, and the other dog on the street. You know, there's a few up there that I never forget. They're many years ago, but I never forget them. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a question here. Can you please repeat what dose of Bach's rescue remedy you recommend for car travel calmness? I have a small terrier-sized dog.
Then I would use only 2 drops on and put it on a treat and see if that works. Because you don't want to overdo it. They're very subtle, but sometimes it depends on the sensitivity of the dog. You know, with some, a little goes a long way, the same with the oils and T-touch. And it just depends. So start at 2 and see what happens. 2 drops, either on a treat or on the pole, just in between the ears, there's an acupressure point. Or if he'll let you, if you have the spray or even the drops, you can just put a little bit on your finger, lift the lip, rub into the gums, and then it goes straight up into the central nervous system. Okay?
Great. Yeah, great question. And great answer.
Thank you.
Any other question? We'll wait a bit more. I'm just writing all that down as well because I'll do a follow-up by email as well, because I'm sure the traveling thing, the car traveling thing is very...
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
As I say, and there is another flower remedy as well, but I find rescue remedy works so well.
Okay.
And the ginger.
Yeah.
If it is a case, you see, travel sickness is often a type of vertigo. So the rescue remedy will work better. But if it is an actual sickness in the stomach, then the ginger might work.
Yeah. And you said 2 drops.
Yes.
Would you increase it if it's a larger dog?
I would.
Yeah. Okay.
I would go up to 3.
Okay.
And if it's a very big dog, if I'm using it with dogs, I will often actually just douse to see what number is needed. I'll douse for my oils. If I'm adding the oils with the person in situ, I will actually do a quick kinesiology test on my fingers to find out how many drops to put in. But that's just me, the way I practice. And I do a lot of this, you know, either dowsing, as I say, using a pendulum, or just using my finger to see with kinesiology.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's so useful, and thanks for compassionate sharing. I think it's...
Well, that was very kind of you to say so. Thank you. I'm very complimented by that.
You are. It was fascinating. It was a fascinating talk.
Well, as you can see, I love my job.
Yeah, yeah.
I really can't get enough of it. And each dog is different. Even though they're breed characteristics, you can't just say, oh, it's a Labrador, so he'll be a fool. Because you might have a Labrador who's not actually a fool, but actually thinks an awful lot and is quite stubborn. And he's smiling as he does it and saying, no, not going to do it at all. And so you've got to work away. And that's another, as far as I'm concerned, breed characteristic of certain Labradors. But the thing that I like to remember, and I learned this at T-Touch, was you meet the dog where it's at. Excitable, fearful, angry. And you say, okay, I have this to offer if you'd like to take it. I'm here to share it. And if they don't, then you respect that. You might ask them again and they still say no, but you respect them because they must be allowed to do it. Because the other thing is that if you're asking a dog to change his behavior, then you should respect them enough to say, I will change my behavior so that the two of us will gel and work together. But in one or two instances, I've come across a dog, and not even a rescue dog, a dog who has been confrontational, or another dog that I went to that was so depressed and angry. And in both cases, the anger and resentment was because of the lifestyle forced upon them by their owners. One was left in a manky run and not allowed in the house anymore. Another was left outside to fend for herself while their owner went away all day. They never took her out. Their idea of exercise was to walk her around the garden. So there was no stimulation of smelling different smells and meeting other dogs. And she'd started to mouth people who arrived in. But when I arrived in to try and help, she literally growled at me, would take no oils, because she knew that her owners, who were very skeptical, they just wanted a quick fix, her owners weren't going to change, so why should she? And I respect that. Do you know, we have to meet them halfway. We can't expect, the days of us being alpha males and leader of the pack, that's gone. It was never there, but that's how we did it. Mutual respect gets you far further.
I think this is going to be the key word of this summit: choice. Give your dog choice.
Yeah, absolutely. I even will do it. And again, I learned it from my tutor in essential oils. I will take my present puppy, Saffron, out of the gate. I'll ask her to sit and look at me and take off the lead. And I'll say, right, your choice. Which way do you want to go? And she'll walk off in whichever direction and I'll go with her. Unless I say, look, it's a bit mucky down there. Today we're going to take my choice and we'll go this way. And so it's mutual as well, because she will often run down the road, and I'm very lucky I'm on country roads, and she will look at a bank and she'll look back at me and I'll say, go on. She knows she can hop in. Or no, there's a bull in that field, you can't go in. And she'll walk on. But she's got a choice. Okay?
Yeah, beautiful.
And it's a lovely relationship, because your dog then trusts you. And so even when I'm sort of, stressed or whatever, lose my cool with my dog, if it's my fault, then I'll apologize because it's my fault. I might have lost my cool with her and she looks at me and I might just go away, and then I'll come back and say, look, I'm sorry. Not your fault, it's mine. And that takes all the heat out of the situation. We're starting afresh and off we go, instead of carrying the bundle of resentment with us.
Absolutely.
It doesn't always work with me, but it's my intention. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can relate. One thing that I do more and more, because now I really started it, but it's about if you ask your dog something and they do it, is just thank them. Just say thank
Yes,
you.
absolutely. Some of my clients laugh at me, but I always say thank you. After all, if I hand you a cup of tea and you don't say thank you, I think you're rude. So, same principle. If you ask your dog to sit, thank you. Good. I say good. Where I say thank you is if I say to this present dog or any of my others, Saffron, I'm asking her not to do something. So I say, leave it. And she stops immediately. Thank you. I'm acknowledging she listened to me and stopped.
Yeah. Right.
And then it's this two-way relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We have another comment. Thanks a million. Floral remedies, interesting. Was mentioned to me before. ST touch. Oh yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So if we don't have any other question, it's your last chance. But otherwise, you can, if you watch this on replay, you can put it in the comments and I would send the question to Liz.
Absolutely. And I'd be glad to answer. Yeah.
And you can contact her as well, and I will send you the link for that. So
remember that anybody who has a rescue can contact me and I will send you a PDF.
Yeah.
Just come through my my website and I have a contact form and you can say, listen, I hear you giving out a freebie. And I will just write one out and send it across. Okay?
Yeah, perfect. Perfect.
All
Thank
right.
you so much. Thank you so much.
It's enjoyable. And I hope that, whoever listened enjoyed or whatever. Okay?
It was
Thank
absolutely
you very much, Geraldine.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll see you
Bye-bye.
tomorrow. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.